Okay, here we go. So this is going to be a video that's going to break down really the 4 stages of the throw from the lower body. So, I recently did a video that was more upper body based. This one's going to be more lower body based. And the big key that we're focusing on, and really it's core lower body. So it's going to be like that part of the throw. So the 4 different stages, there's going to be when you'll initially step. There's going to be when your foot touches down, front foot touches down, and kind of the same time period as when you're pushing off the back leg. And then you have the time where you actually, like an initial back foot pushes off, and then you're going to have the time where your back foot extends off the ground and leaves the ground. Then you're going to have the finish. So just the 4 stages, just break it all down nice and easy for you all. And we'll start here with Anthony just because he, we can now get both sides of the actual throw. So that's nice. So we'll go ahead and hop right through it. And first we'll start more on the side just because the side is a point of the throw where you can see more of that initial step. So you can see here in the initial step, we're going to look at the front leg here first. And what happens here in the front leg is we get a internal rotation of the front leg. So you can see how it kind of turns inwards like that. And some of these things are going to be things you want to start implementing in your own throw, especially once we get further into the finish and how you're transitioning forward. But even with the initial step, I think a lot of guys don't really do that initial rotation. He does a pretty good job of it, but like Patrick Mahomes is a great example, or even Trevor Lawrence does it really good. A couple guys that are really good with that initial internal rotation. We also see abduction, so the foot is going away from the body here, so there's a bit of an abduction going on. And there's also a bit of knee flexion is the other thing, so your knee is not going to be completely straight. It's going to be slightly bent and in the spot. The next thing is going to be with the upper body. We're seeing a load, so you're rotating back towards your throwing arm, right? So you can see how when you're initially starting, the first thing that happens is you rotate back. If you're right-handed, you rotate to your right side. If you're left-handed, you rotate to your left side. The next thing is on the back leg. We see a little bit of hip flexion in the back leg, right? So you're definitely more leaned over in this position. Now this would be the better one to see when you're initially starting the throw here. So you're definitely more hip flexed. We're also seeing external rotation, so you should be loading up onto that back leg. Again, you can see the external rotation that's happening as the front leg is internally rotating. Then we also see a slight knee flexion here that's going on as you're going and loading. We're getting into more overall knee flexion. We also see ankle dorsiflexion right here. And then we also are seeing a ankle inversion, a slight inversion of the ankle, which just means that we're maintaining or kind of pushing a little bit more on the outside part of the foot as we're getting everything set up. And then within the, from more of a sagittal perspective, we're seeing there's a slight lumbar spine flexion and also a thoracic spine flexion, so it's not extended going back. You'll see what extended going back looks like here in a second. It's going to be definitely more lumbar flex, and the lumbar spine is going to be flexed, and the thoracic spine, the mid-back, is going to be extended, actually. So that's staying a little bit more upright and creating extension. We definitely don't want to be leaning forward in this stage. We'll see what the opposites of those look like when we go through the throw if you're not familiar with those movements. Next thing is going to be the back leg push-off, front foot landing. So now, as you're landing on that front leg, you should see that the front leg starts to externally rotate. I know a lot of people want to know with that front foot, does it need to be pointing towards the target? Does it need to be landing on the ball of the foot, the heel, and really, you could land with the whole foot down together. You could land with the toe facing, a little bit more straight ahead, as long as you get some internal rotation first. I see a lot of people that just first externally rotate, never get any type of internal rotation. I think that ends up being the bigger factor that impacts your ability to generate force in the throw. We just want to be able to create just massive external, or we want to get to the point where you're able to create external rotation, because the external rotation becomes such a huge part of the throw in the hips as you're going through it. And so making sure that you're aware that first you want to internally rotate, then get into external rotation of the hip is going to be something that's very, very important to understand. The next part that we're going to go into is the slight amount of hip flexion that we see, right? So the hip is definitely flexing here, okay? And then we're gonna also see a little bit of hip adduction, right? So now your body's now getting closer to your foot, so your hip is adducting, which is going to be using more of the inside muscles, where when you're abducting, you're going to be using more of those outside muscles. We're also seeing a bit of ankle eversion here. It really ends up being a little bit of ankle eversion and inversion. You're starting to balance, and then you're also seeing ankle dorsiflexion, right? Because we're landing on that front leg, and then we're in a knee flex position. So we're just really trying to get a better understanding of what should be happening from a technical standpoint when we're looking at the actual throw, and just basing all the information off of, what are some of the really small things that we're seeing that can dictate how the throw ends up being generated. So, we don't want to go into, too much of exactly where that front foot is going to be positioned. We're more talking about, okay, if there is any external rotation, or when does the external rotation happen in the hip in comparison to internal rotation happening in the hip, or when is there knee extension in comparison to knee flexion, right? And so now we're also going to go up into the core, or actually let's go back leg first. So back leg is obviously going through internal rotation. It's rotating inwards. Okay, we're also seeing hip extension. We're seeing it push away. We're seeing hip abduction. We're going to see the foot get away from the hip, right? And we're seeing knee extension, and we're seeing ankle eversion, right? So all the weight's going on the inside part of the ankle. On the front leg, we'd be seeing a little bit more ankle inversion, right? Because we're trying to maintain stability within that front leg. But you're also seeing a little bit of eversion too because of the balance. And then with the core, we're seeing a beginning of a rotation towards the forward, towards your offhand. So he's rotating left here. Okay, we're also seeing a bit of a lumbar extension. Okay, this will be the easier way to see it, right? So see how the lumbar starts to extend, the upper body starts to lean back. We're starting to see the back go into a degree of extension. We're also seeing a bit of the thoracic spine, or really we're seeing, the lower core rotate, and I'm going through my notes here as we're going through it, so bear with me a little bit. So, but you're seeing the lower core start to rotate first, then the upper body rotates. So lower core rotates, then upper body rotates as your body's transitioning up onto it. And you can even say maybe your upper body's staying back and staying, facing backwards as your lower core starts to open up. You really want this to still be rotating back as you start to open up with your hips when that front foot touches the ground. Okay, so that ends up being a big part of it. So that's the second stage. That's when your front foot's landing. So now we're talking about when your front or your back foot is actually like pushing off. You're getting that extension in that back leg, and you're starting to absorb into this front leg, and what we're seeing now. So what we're seeing within the back leg is we're seeing a degree of hip flexion, right? So now you already extended and pushed off that foot. Now you're driving your knee forward, right? So you're going into a bit of hip flexion. You kind of go from going into hip extension into hip flexion during this actual phase. We're also seeing internal rotation on the back leg and plantar flexion of that back leg. Really now what we're seeing on the front leg is going to be what's important, which is we're seeing extension now out of that front leg. Okay, it's starting to really extend back and push back as it's trying to stabilize. We're also seeing abduction of the hip, and external rotation of the hip. So you want to make sure that as your weight is transferring forward, you're continuing to externally rotate in that front leg, and we also want to be abducting in the hip, so we don't want that hip to go too far out to the side. If you end up allowing yourself to fall over the side there, now you know that you're over pushing all of your weight. We want to make sure that we're pushing our weight back inside to make it so you're able to keep your body in a nice balanced position. And then your trunk is rotating away from the throwing arm, so we're continuing to rotate through here. Okay, and then you also start to go into a lateral side bend away from the throwing arm. So you can see Anthony's right-handed, so he's bending to the left side as he's going through the throw. And then we're also seeing a bit of a extension through the mid-back, right? So here we're maintaining extension through this part of the actual throw, and right now you really got to be in an extended position, really in the lower back and in the thoracic spine, and because we're setting up to go into a flexion as you follow through. And there's a bit of stabilization happening within the external rotator. So these muscles need to be stabilizing the spine to make sure that the body's not overly rotating or overly side bending. So these muscles are going to be very, very active during this time period just because of what's going on during the actual throw. And then the last thing that we're going to go over is the trunk flexion, right? So now during this stage, we can see a slight amount of flexion through the thoracic spine, through the lumbar spine, as we're finishing, right? So follow through, boom, see how that happens right there where the lumbar spine starts to flex, the thoracic spine starts to flex. That's going to be the main part of that. There's going to be a continued rotation, so you don't want to stop. I see this a lot when people are finishing where they stop their actual rotation in their spine. You want to continue to rotate through there, and we need to also see a continued stabilization of the muscles that are in this part of the side, right, to make sure that we're not leaning too far over to the side during the actual finish, right? So we want to be able to rotate through this part of the actual throw and not be bending over to the side during this actual throw. And you know, when you're actually in our quarterback mechanics program, we'll go into what muscles are going to be doing this and how do you assess what are going to be some of the right things to be doing during this time period, and if there are things that are not correct, what are the muscles that are dictating that, and how you can actually test to make sure that those are the right muscles or not the right muscles, and what are some different assessments that you could do with the quarterbacks in order to fix that and correct that. So yeah, that's a big reason why we did the actual courses, so you can actually get more information behind it. The front leg goes into the ankle dorsiflexion, right? So we're continuing to finish onto that front leg, and it's kind of a cool thing just to kind of you know, as you're transferring all your weight forward, you know, really going into the knee extension and the knee plantar flexion right here, something that I think is important. We see that really well with Aaron Rodgers, but, you know, there's a lot of people that talk about how you want to be really down in the ground, and I've even said that, but it seems like you really need to be more plantar flexing as you're finishing and getting all your weight onto the balls of your feet. But now if we go into this stage, we're going into dorsiflexion of the ankle, so now the ankle needs to be stabilizing and inverting and everting, so it's just about balance at this point, right? We're also going into hip flexion. Okay, we're away from hip extension now. We're going into hip flexion and hip adduction. So these muscles need to be active. We need to be controlling how the hip is moving through that part of the throw. I thought about saying we're going into internal rotation within the hip, but then I also think that there's external rotation going on within the hip. So I think that there's a little bit of both that are happening right there. There's not one or the other. There's both as we're following through. And the back leg is going to be going through some degree of internal rotation, and it's going to be going through some degree of abduction, right? So your foot's going to be getting away from your body probably and not getting towards your body, and you're also going to continue that internal rotation through. I didn't talk about flexion or extension just because I think that there could be both, and that back ankle is going to probably be more plantar flex than dorsiflex because it's pushing off. So the knee can be in a more extended position, but we also see Tom Brady go in more of a flex position, so it's hard to say that there's going to be one or the other in that as well. So, you know, just want to give some more information for you guys to understand what this QB mechanic course is going to be about. This is going hard into the lower body and really understanding what are the actions that are happening here. Obviously, we want to get more into the muscular perspective. We want to get more into the do's and the don'ts, the corrects and the incorrects. But today I just wanted to give a better understanding of what we're going to be going in the actual course because we just released it. And I think this would be a great video for you to be able to understand exactly what it all entails. All right? Let me know if you have any questions. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. And if you did, you could subscribe down below, and that way you can get updates on any of the new videos that we get. Also, if you want to, you can check out some of our other breakdowns for speed and throwing. We have exercises, also jumping mechanics videos, a lot of great stuff within our channel. Hope you enjoy.